Well, thank you for joining with me for this week's midweek video as we look at the 10 essentials to our progressive sanctification. And if you've been watching these along with me, you know what I'm going to be saying next, right? As we grow in our, I don't even know what I was going to say next. As we grow in our relation to become more like Christ and walking with Him. That is hilarious. I just totally messed myself up. So that joke kind of backfired on me. So what we're going to be looking at now, we're halfway through after this video, and this one we're looking at the freedom from habitual sin. And we can get an aspect of this in Romans chapter 6, verse 6. Knowing this, that our old man was crucified with Him. Right? We have died to who we used to be. So not just that Christ died, but when we recognize His work of salvation for our lives, it is as though we died with Him. It's an important piece of doctrine. It helps us better understand baptism and different aspects of that. But that's not what we're getting in today. Knowing that our old man was crucified with Him, that the body of sin might be done away with, that we should no longer be slaves of sin. So part of dying with Him and relating to His death, it is as though we have died with Him, and so then it is we've gotten rid of this body of sin, right? We've broke connection with it, so we're no longer slaves of sin. That's an important language to think about, right? Slavery has a bad annotation to it, and it should, right? And so who wants to be a slave, right? Isn't it better to be free? But when we were sinful, we were actually slaves. We're in bondage to that, and it's a weird thing to comprehend, and we don't have time to get into it in this video, but I encourage you to think about that a little bit. How were you in bondage to the things that God said, don't be this way, or saying do this and you refuse to do it, right? We've talked about many times that God's commands are for humanity's good, not just because He's a rule maker. So sometimes it's really good for us to sit back and go, so why does God say not to do this? Or why does God say to do this? And now I'm encouraging you to think through those things and think, well, how was I in bondage? How was I in slavery to those things? Right? Just a quick example, right? If we find our value and worth in humans' judgments of us, whether it's how good we look or how funny we are or whatever those things are, how much time and effort do we spend trying to appease humanity so they like us? Right? We're in slavery to that, right? I have to try to make my social media post engaging and exciting and fun, right? I need to make sure that I have everything looking good on myself before I go out so the world will accept me, whatever it might be, right? Entertainers are always inundated with this, right? They have to give us great material that's exciting and energetic that makes us want to come back again. That's a lot of work, right? That's they're in bondage to that. To be appeased to the public. And so that's how we were with our sin. And so we don't want to be that anymore. We want to get away from that bondage. And so as we grow in discipleship, we want to have freedom from this habitual sin that we were in bondage to. And this is the important part to understand. So we want to cast that stuff aside. But the problem is say these crayons represent all the things that are in my life, and I would need a whole lot more of these crayons to be a literal illustration of this, that I have in my life that God says in His Word that I shouldn't have, right? And so I say, boy, God, I'm a sinner. Thank You for dying for my sins and taking them on You, and please forgive me of all my sins, right? And I lay them at the foot of the cross of Jesus Christ. Oh, and I drop my illustration. Hold that thought. So I say that, but what happens if I'm still holding on to one of them? And I still have this one because I'm like, this one though, this isn't a big deal. God, I can handle this one. See, I know in Your Word it says this, but I don't think it means what some people say it means, so this one's okay for me to hold on to. Or, the Bible was written a long time ago, and it's not quite up with modern day culture, so this one's actually okay for me to still hold on to. See a problem? Did I really give all my sins over for Jesus? Now, I gave him all the ones I was willing to give up, right? But this one I wanted to hold on to. I'm still in contact with this one. So am I free from all my sins? No, because I'm justifying to myself why I can keep this one. So we have to really watch that in our walk with sanctification. Have we really given up all of our sins to the work of Jesus Christ, or is there something that we're holding on to? That's what we mean by habitual sin. Not that I accidentally make a mistake where, this pops up and I'm like, I can't believe I did that again. I'm so sorry, God. I don't want to do that. And I try to live my life without that sin anymore. And then pops up again. I did it again. Sorry, God. I don't want to do that, right? That's the difference of making a mistake and where we get that idea for the Greek of what the word means, sin, of missing the mark, right? I was shooting for the bullseye, but I hit outside of it, right? My intent was good, but I missed the mark. But I still sinned, right? It still wasn't hitting the bullseye. Versus I'm going to shoot at the target, and I'm purposely going to shoot over here because I don't want to hit the target, God. I want to hit the outside ring. And so I'm purposely going to be shooting for the outside ring, right? That's different. And so that's the same idea of habitual sins where we purposely are holding on to them. And in our sanctification process, we need to make sure that we have freedom from habitual sin, where there's sins that we're trying to hold on to because we don't want to change that. We're in disagreement with God. And so we want to really wash that into our lives. So what's the key component to know when we're doing that? You'll start justifying. You'll start saying, that was a cultural reference in the Bible. There are some of those, but you better know for sure it's cultural before you use that analogy. Or say, doesn't apply now. Or you're trying to make up, I don't think that word means what we think it means. Well, again, maybe those are cases, but you better have really good proof that that's the case before you take that stand. So whenever you're trying to justify and saying why you can do something that God has told you not to do, or why you don't have to do something that God says to do, there's a good chance that you're trying to hold on to a habitual sin, and you really need to have freedom from that. So more could be said on this, but for now, let's leave it at that.